Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. This is the East Los Angeles community meeting for the City of LA's assessment of fair housing. Please note that we are recording the meeting this evening, and it may be shared at a later date on the city's website. Before we get into the meeting, I need to let you know a couple of important things. We have Spanish interpretation available, and everyone will need to select the language they'd like to hear the meeting in. You can do that by clicking on the interpretation button on the lower part of your screen. Looks like a globe. And from there, you can choose between English and Spanish. Thank you. So just again, in case I think another person or two joined during that, we have Spanish interpretation available this evening, and everyone participating in the meeting will need to select their language that they would like to participate in. You can do that by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom, and from there you can choose between English and Spanish. We do also have sign language interpretation available, and you can choose the ASL interpretation using that same interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. This meeting is also being closed captioned, and anyone wishing to view the captions can click on the link in the chat. We're placing that there now. And that link will take you to the stream text site where you can see the captions. So I'm going to pause here for a moment just to give everyone a chance to get acquainted with those. Just a reminder, you'll need to select your language using the interpretation button at the bottom. You can choose between English and Spanish. There's also ASL interpretation. And there's a link in the chat to a stream text site. And if you will open that, you'll be able to see the captions for the meeting. And just a reminder for everyone, because we do have interpreters assisting us this evening, it will be helpful when we get to discussion portions of the meeting if you'll speak slowly so that our interpreters are able to capture what you're saying. So with that, a couple of other notes just about how we will use Zoom. When we have opportunities for questions and discussion, you can use the raise hand button to signal that you would like to speak. You can just click on reactions at the bottom of your screen, and from there you can choose the raise hand option. You can control your audio and video using the mute and start video buttons, and you can share questions or ideas throughout the meeting by using the chat feature. While the chat is available, we encourage you to use it. We also encourage you to participate verbally if you are able to do that. That just allows our interpreters a chance to interpret your comments and ideas and feedback for the entire group that's participating. We'll try to answer any questions that you have tonight during the meeting, but if we're not able to answer your question, we can get in touch with you afterward by email if you will, in the chat, leave your question and some contact information. And for those of you who are joining by phone, you can use *6 to mute and unmute your sound, and you can use *9 to raise your hand. When we get to the discussion portion of the meeting, I'll mention those commands again. And finally, we will be doing some live polling during tonight's meeting using slido.com. You may want to go ahead and open up a browser tab and pull up the Slido site. It's slido.com. And once you get to that site, there's a code. You'll put in the code 120-120, and you'll be able to participate at a later point in the meeting in some polling questions that we'll ask. I'll go over all of that again, when we get to that portion of the meeting, but you may just want to go ahead and pull that up. That information is in the chat as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy to do some introductions.
Hello, good evening. I'm Nancy Twum Aquaboa. I'm with the Los Angeles Housing Department, also known as LAHD. This project, an assessment of fair housing, or AFH, will analyze the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles, essentially looking at whether all residents are able to access housing that is suitable for them, free from unlawful discrimination. It will also look at whether the areas where people live impact their ability to access different community resources and opportunities. These types of studies are required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for any city or county that receives HUD grants for community development or affordable housing. Additionally, as of 2018, the state of California also requires public agencies, including cities, counties, and housing authorities, to prepare fair housing assessments. The City of Los Angeles Housing Department will be leading the development of this study in partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, also known as HACLA. So in addition to myself this evening, we also have other staff from LHD who are here, and I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves now.
Hi everyone, Joel Montano with the Los Angeles Housing Department. Happy to be here with you all tonight, and I will pass it over to Micah.
Hi all, my name is Micah O'Brien. I'm also with the Housing Department in the Policy Unit. I will pass it on to Maya.
Hi, Maya Boone, Housing Department, Policy and Research Unit. Good to be here.
Great, thank you. And we also have staff from HACLA, so I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, Ann Lynch from the Housing Authority, City of Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Norma Rosas with Section 8 Department. I am the ombudsperson for special programs.
Great, thank you. LHD and HACLA are working with Mosaic Community Planning, a consultant firm to assist us in the research and development of the city study. Members of Mosaic's team are here, so I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves now.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jeremy Gray. I'm a principal of Mosaic and will be facilitating the meeting tonight.
Hi, I'm Melissa Mayu, also a principal with Mosaic, and happy to be here tonight.
And hi all, I'm Heaven. I'm an associate planner with Mosaic.
Great, thank you. If you'd like to contact any of the team about the AFH, you can email lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. This email address will be placed in the chat box for reference. You can also send a message there if you have additional input after tonight or would like to be added to an email list for updates about this project. Thank you.
So one of the most important aspects of the AFH is hearing from local residents and other stakeholders about the needs that you see related to fair housing and access to opportunity in LA. Having that on the ground perspective from many different people living and working in the city every day is crucial. We'll give an overview of fair housing and the AFH process so that everyone has an understanding of the topics we'll be talking about, but most of the meeting time will be a chance for us to hear from you. Your input will help identify priority fair housing issues and their causes. It will also shape the goals and strategies that city and HACLA leaders adopt. So it's very important that we hear your perspectives, and we'll talk more about ways you can stay involved with the project at the end of the meeting. We're going to get started tonight with a polling question, and this will take us back to the Slido page. So again, you'll need to pull up on your web browser slido.com, SLIDO.com, and you'll put in a code, and that code number is 120. And what we wanted to start by asking tonight is, what do you like best about your neighborhood? You can share ideas, and you can share more than one idea too. So once you access the Slido page, you can type your ideas into the box, and as you enter those, they are going to appear as a word cloud on this slide. So again, what we're interested in starting out here are, what things do you like about your neighborhood? And enter as many as you would like. So the first one that we have, that we see here, is diversity. And okay, good, close to a grocery store. As multiple people may mention the same idea, the same words, you'll see those magnified in size relative to the others. So I'll give, I think Heaven added it to the chat for us as well, but you'll see that link to Slido, and the code again is 120. For those of you that have participated already, would you like to share anything additional? We have somebody mention diversity, somebody mentioned that where they live, they're close to a grocery store. Anybody want to talk a little bit more about that? I'll invite you to raise your hand. You can unmute and share with us maybe why those things are important to you, or any other elaboration you'd like to offer. Okay, I don't see any hands. Let me ask this question. As people are continuing to, I think, type into the poll, don't type responses to this question in, because it's going to be a different sort of question. So friendly neighbors, someone added. Are there improvements you'd like to see where you live? So we are listing on the polling slide some things that we like about where we live, but maybe there are things that you would like to see improved about where you live. Again, don't type those into the poll, but I would invite you, if you'd like to share those, you may raise your hand. We'll call on you to unmute and share. Okay. I don't see any hands.
And if anyone maybe isn't in a place where they can access Slido, but would like to type something in the chat or share out loud, you can do that too.
Okay, well, we'll move on. There's one last opportunity, though. Anybody want to share anything in addition to what's typed onto the polling slide here? Things that you like about your neighborhood, why you like them, or any improvements that you would like to see in your neighborhood. Okay. Well, thank you to those of you who provided some of those responses there. Diversity, friendly neighborhood, friendly neighbors, close to a grocery store. Those are all good things that we'd like to find in our neighborhoods. And I'm glad that you have those in the places that you live.
And we have one comment from the chat about no major improvements in the neighborhood needed, but would like to see parking controls.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. So we know having access to resources and a safe, clean environment is an important aspect of fair housing. And that's something we're going to talk more about tonight. But before we get into further discussion, I think we'll have a brief overview about fair housing law. Generally, when we talk about fair housing, we're talking about everyone's right to participate in the housing market. to own, sell, purchase, or rent housing of their choice without fear of unlawful discrimination. That includes things like renting or buying a home, obtaining homeowners insurance or renters insurance, having access to housing loans, and having fair property appraisals. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on race or ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, and disability. We refer to these as protected classes because people are protected from housing discrimination based on these characteristics or classes. Along with the Fair Housing Act, many states have additional protections. The state of California has a series of laws that expand fair housing protections to include several more protected classes, which you see listed here. They include marital status, age, ancestry, immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, veteran or military status, occupation, or any other arbitrary factors. The state also protects people from discrimination based on their source of income. That includes the use of Section 8 housing choice vouchers or other similar types of housing assistance. So as you can see, you have considerable additional fair housing protection under California laws. Here we have a few examples of actions that would be considered illegal discrimination if they're based on protected class. Examples include telling someone that a house is not available for rent or sale when it really is, or denying mortgage loan applications based on protected class. Landlords or lenders cannot apply different terms to a lease or loan based on protected characteristics. So, for example, a landlord could not charge a higher security deposit or higher rent to a family with children than to a household without kids. A property manager also couldn't steer families with children to one part of an apartment development, and real estate agents cannot steer home buyers or limit showings to certain neighborhoods based on protected class. Refusing to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities and refusing to accept Section 8 housing choice vouchers are also examples of discrimination that you might see in your community. While this is not a complete list of ways housing discrimination is present, it does illustrate some of the ways it may happen beyond just refusing to rent or sell housing to someone. In 2015, HUD adopted a new fair housing rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or AFFH. That rule called on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. The AFFH rule requires cities to look at access to community resources and opportunities. Things like good schools, good jobs, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has equal access to neighborhoods with these types of opportunities, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or any other protected class. The AFFH rule also requires cities to take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and to create communities that are inclusive for everyone. Cities must work to reduce affordable housing needs and other barriers that limit access to opportunities and resources. As Nancy mentioned earlier, the state of California has its own affirmatively furthering fair housing law that requires all cities and counties to assess fair housing as part of their housing elements. So this is a requirement at both the federal and state level. Thinking about topics like this, so fair housing, affordable housing, being able to access resources in your community, what types of needs do you see in your community? Is there, for example, enough housing for seniors, large families, people with disabilities, people with low incomes? So this is another polling question that we're going to use the Slido site for. So we're going to put that information into the chat for you again, so it's handy. The page is slido.com, SLIDO, and you'll put in the code 120. You don't need to redo it each time. If you already have that page up from the last question, you can go right back to it. There's a QR code on the screen too that will take you there. And then, as Melissa mentioned a few minutes ago, you can use the chat. If you're in a place where you're not able to open a browser tab to participate, you can just type an answer into the chat, and we can include it there too. So the question here again that we'd like to hear your input on, what sorts of needs, housing-wise, or opportunity, resource-wise, do you see in your community? Are people able to access housing fairly? Are there particular types of housing that you would like to see more of? Are there populations that don't have enough access to housing? What groups would those be? So as these answers come in, rather than a word cloud, because they're longer, it's going to create a list, and it will scroll down the page. So a couple that we have to start with, needs in their community would be affordable housing for big families, not just for students or singles. Technological access and support for those without computers and those who aren't technologically literate. I think that's a good one too. I'm kind of curious from the person who mentioned first about affordable housing for big families, not just students or singles. Oftentimes, hi Daniel, I see your hand, I'm going to come right to you. Oftentimes I think affordable housing might be easiest or it might be more financially feasible to produce that in smaller unit sizes, but we know that that doesn't suit all families. So I'm interested if whoever typed that would like to share more about the need for housing for big families. I'd love to hear more about it. For now, though, I'll go to Daniel. Would you like to unmute and share?
Yes. Hi, how are you? I was on the phone listening, then I was able to get to my computer. So you asked a question before that was for, I think it was an opportunity to raise hand, and it's escaping me, but I had a comment, but I'll just move to the slide comment that I shared. The neighborhood that I live in, I was one who wrote diversity. It's very diverse, and I'll often talk to neighbors, varying degrees of resources. Some have shared their low income status for many years, and they don't know how to export a PDF file. They don't know how to, I mean, there's a term, I used to work in this little known place outside of San Francisco where there's a lot of technology invented. I later became a small business owner in food and beverage. And it's just astounding how difficult it is to just submit a form. And there is also a term, some of you may be familiar with, some of the people posting and facilitating this, which is technological discrimination. So if a person doesn't have a browser that's up to date or isn't operable with one city council district's website versus another is completely and entirely unacceptable, because we all know that for anyone to access things, they need, in some instances, technology, or they could wait in line for 4 hours, 5 hours, while potential, mental and physical health conditions are exacerbated. So I'll leave that there.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for raising that, Daniel. I appreciate you making that point. Someone else added to the poll, immigrants often knock on my door looking for a room to rent. Is that a need that others of you have observed in your community? People looking for something as small as just a room to rent? Anybody want to elaborate on that point? Okay. I don't see any hands raised. I'm not sure if there, I don't think there's anything added to the chat.
No, not about this.
Okay.
And I guess, Daniel, the first question was about things that you value in your neighborhood. So I don't know if you had a comment about that that you wanted to add and weren't able to before, I think feel free.
Oh, I added that. That was diversity. There was another question though that wasn't for Slido, that it was a raised hand question, and I don't remember what it was.
Maybe about improvements.
Oh, yeah. A resource center that may not handle the wide variety of things related to housing, because 4 desks and whatnot can't do everything, but it might be able to route people specifically and provide them with an appointment.
Okay.
There's no shortage of vacant buildings across different parts of Los Angeles, especially centrally located, that's accessible, more easily from the far sides of the east, part of Los Angeles, west, north, south. So a few of those.
Okay, great. So kind of to help people get, maybe the resources aren't necessarily all there, but help route where they can go.
People will know where to go. I'm resourceful, technologically savvy. I have no idea who does what until there's clarification, and the websites themselves. People that you need to be an attorney and or be able to deal with typographical errors or just bad copywriting, and it's not right. I met a homeless man the other night, completely lucid, coherent, empathetic. Didn't look like he'd been displaced for a long time, and he was just throw his hands up. He's like, I give up. It's too hard.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. So we will talk a little bit now about what the study that we're working on will look like. The assessment of fair housing is an analysis of the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles and a plan for how to expand fair housing through 2028. Under the federal AFH rule, all HUD grantees are required to complete a fair housing study every 5 years, demonstrating how they will affirmatively further fair housing, including actionable strategies for improving housing access and reducing barriers to opportunity. The AFH will include a variety of components. We'll be looking at demographics and the patterns related to residential segregation, integration, and income. We'll identify areas of the city with high levels of racial segregation, including those with high levels of poverty and affluence. We'll also look at access to opportunities like schools, jobs, transit, and a clean environment, and whether everyone throughout the city has fair access to these types of resources. We'll consider housing costs and whether affordable housing need varies by protected class. We'll also look at public housing, tax credit developments, and other types of affordable housing, what is available, and in what parts of the city. The AFH will include a focus on disability that considers whether people with all types of disabilities are able to find suitable housing in an area they choose. And finally, the study will include an overview of fair housing resources and activities provided by the city, housing authority, and other partner agencies. Community input, including the input that we will get from you tonight, will also help inform all aspects of the study. The City of LA recently prepared an assessment of fair housing for its 2021 to 2029 housing element that illustrates some of the things that will be in this AFH. For example, the city looked at housing affordability by race and ethnicity. The chart here shows what share of renters spend more than 1/2 of their income on housing, what we refer to as having a severe cost burden. About 37% of Black and 33% of Latinx renters spend more than 1/2 of their income on housing, compared to about 28% for white renters and 26% for Asian renters. So we can see from this data that the ability to afford housing varies by race and ethnicity in LA, which is a fair housing issue that the AFH now underway will explore. Based on all the research, data collection, previous studies, and community input, the assessment of fair housing will identify fair housing issues in the city. For each issue, we'll outline the most significant causes and develop a series of goals and strategies to address them. The strategies need to be meaningful steps toward reducing fair housing issues, and every year, HUD will ask the city to report what achievements it has made toward meeting its fair housing goals. In addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will be very important as local leaders make decisions about housing policies and resources. It will be built on community input and is one way residents can voice their opinions to city and HACLA leadership. The study will advance past fair housing efforts, including the city's housing element and its previous assessment of fair housing from 2018. Ultimately, what will come out of the plan is an action-oriented strategy that can impact the city's decisions about how to spend the grant funds it receives for housing, community development, and homelessness. The strategies will also shape projects, programs, or policies by the city or HACLA. The final plan will be adopted by the City Council and HACLA leadership. It represents a commitment by the city and HACLA to implement activities that expand fair housing and stop future housing discrimination for all residents. I'd like to share a few examples of current fair housing efforts underway by the City of LA and its partners. Stay Housed LA helps prevent eviction through outreach to landlords and tenants and legal assistance to renters facing eviction. It's a collaboration between the city, Los Angeles County, and local legal service providers that began during the pandemic. It responds to the need for tenant protection, which was one of the contributing factors identified in the 2018 AFH and the city's housing element. Another approach designed to improve fair housing for renters is the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance. The law prohibits landlords from harassing tenants by removing housing services, ignoring repair requests, refusing to accept rent, or doing other things that interfere with a tenant's ability to enjoy their home in peace. The ordinance was one strategy outlined in the city's 2018 AFH to respond to displacement pressure and the lack of affordable housing. The housing element identifies education about the anti-harassment ordinance as a goal, and that outreach is currently underway by the city and its partners. You can see from the outline here that we'll have many opportunities for public input during the AFH process. That includes this meeting and other similar community meetings that we will hold later this month and have already held this month, along with a series of stakeholder meetings and focus groups in January. We also have a survey open that we hope everyone will participate in, and we will provide a link to that survey a little later in the meeting. In the spring, we will want to hear from the community again to get feedback on the draft fair housing issues and strategies to address them. By the summer, we anticipate having a complete draft assessment of fair housing for the public to review. We'll then make any final revisions to prepare for an August approval by City Council and HACLA. At this point, I'd like to pause and take any questions about any of the material that we have presented so far. Anything that you might have a question about related to fair housing law, the AFH that we are working on. If you have a question, you can use the raise hand feature so that we can identify you. If you're joining by phone, just a reminder, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. You can mute and unmute using the *6 command. I would also invite you, feel free to put questions or comments into the chat. And just a reminder again, if we're not able to answer the questions that you have tonight, we are happy to follow up with you after the meeting. We would just need you to also provide some contact information. So I'm going to pause here. If there are any questions about anything we've talked about so far, I'm happy to answer those. And I will look for any hands or chat messages. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll move on to another polling question. We talked just a minute ago about Stay Housed LA and the anti-harassment law that help protect renters. Kind of along those lines, we would like to hear more from you about other agencies or services or programs that you know about in the city of Los Angeles that help protect people's housing rights. And so I would invite you, this is a Slido question. So if you are able to open that browser tab and enter your response to the question there, we'll collect all your responses in a word cloud on this slide. So what we want to hear from you are what sorts of programs and services, what organizations out there in the community that do fair housing work are you familiar with? If you felt like you had been discriminated against, where would you turn? Who would you ask for help? It may be that you're not sure or that you don't know of any organizations or agencies, and that's good information for us too. So if that's the case, feel free to respond to the poll and just say that you don't know or that you're not aware of any. As we're trying to understand kind of what resources are available in the community, it's just helpful for us to know who you do know about, or if you don't know about any of them. Feel free also to make use of the chat. So if you have a response to the question and want to enter that in the chat, you can do that. And I'm happy to call on you as well. So if you'd like to raise your hand or unmute yourself and share anything that comes to mind, even if you're not able to respond directly to the poll. We are starting to see a couple of responses. So the housing department, I'm going to assume that probably means the city's housing department, but if I don't have that right, just raise your hand and let me know. I see the Housing Rights Center, your council office, and 211 all are mentioned here. Anybody want to share anything in addition to these? Feel free to unmute and let us know what organizations you might be aware of. Or maybe ask this, can you think of ways that the city or the housing authority could improve awareness around these programs or services so that more people knew about them are there good ways that you've seen for that sort of information to be communicated within your community? Okay. I don't see anybody waiting to speak. I don't think we have any chat responses. So just to recap, I think the responses here that we see, the city's own housing department, the Housing Rights Center, contacting a council member's office, and also 211. So good. Thank you for those of you who provided those responses. We can move on to a different question in a more free-form discussion here. So I think what I'd like to do as we, so the remainder of our questions are not polling questions. They're just questions that we will discuss together. And before we do that, what I'd like to invite you to do, if we could, it would be helpful to know who we have joining us and maybe what interested you in the meeting this evening. So I'm going to invite you, you don't need to raise your hand, but if you'd like to unmute, just let us know your name. If you want to share your neighborhood, you can do that. But I'd like to hear about, were you coming to the meeting, attending tonight just to learn more about fair housing? Did you have issues that you wanted to share? Kind of what was your interest level? What interested you in the meeting? So I'm going to stop.
Jeremy, I'll just add to that question as well. If anyone wants to unmute and just share in terms of how they even heard about this meeting.
Great.
That would be good to know as well.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
One comment in the chat about hearing it through a list serve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. So does anyone want to speak to what brought you to the meeting? What were you hoping to get out of the meeting? Or if there was anything you wanted to specifically share? Any thoughts at all in regards to perhaps what your expectations are, and are we meeting those expectations or falling short?
And Maria, I see your response. Thank you for that in the chat. I think we do have quite a few community members that are with us. We're about to begin some discussion, but I think it will be helpful. I think we will probably get more out of that discussion if we kind of know more about what your interests are and what your expectations are for the meeting. We can make sure that we are able to get to those.
And we have a comment in the chat from Daniel, join to learn as much as possible about LAHD and better understand topics around discrimination. He lives in East Hollywood and found out about the meeting on the LAHD website.
Okay, great.
Right. Yes, so in terms of discrimination and perhaps how it's being addressed from our department, I'll speak to the fact that we do, and I believe someone did respond in one of the Slido questions as far as what do they know in terms of fair housing resources. So what the LHD currently has a contract with the Housing Rights Center, and they provide services to the city, and have been for years. as far as responding to any issues of fair housing complaints, any investigations that residents have, any concerns about rental properties and other things as it relates to attempting to access housing. So they have a number of resources in regards to attorneys, as well as a few testers who actually go out to particular sites if there is claim of fair housing discrimination. And so they are our service provider for that. So we refer people to the Housing Rights Center, those who are seeking assistance, those who call into our hotline. That is who we work with. And the Housing Rights Center also does a number of different trainings and different informational sessions in regards to educating residents about fair housing as well. So that's pretty much who we work with. And I believe the Housing Rights Center is also contracted by the county. At least they were in the past, and I'm pretty sure their contract probably continued forward. And then also the Housing Rights Center, as Jeremy mentioned, one of the state protections that are in place is in one of the protected classes, a source of income. And so the Housing Rights Center is the entity that is also the organization that addresses any issues regarding discrimination from landlords based off of those who are interested in renting properties who are voucher holders or have some other third party payment subsidy. So they are the ones that address those particular concerns and are the enforcement entity for that to really to be able to help protect those who are possibly experiencing discrimination based off of their source of income. So that's the other role that the Housing Rights Center plays.
That's good information. Thank you for adding that. Let me, so I'll just provide again opportunity. Anybody else want to unmute and share what brought you to the meeting this evening and what you'd like to get out of it?
I'll share. My name is Crystal Gunn. I'm actually with the Accessible Housing Program for the city. And so I wanted to, I'm on the grievance and tenant outreach team. So it's always good to hear what kind of issues tenants are struggling with, what property managers, what they know, what they don't know. I will say ACHP, if you live in one of our covered developments, it is a resource for people that have discrimination complaints or anything like that. And so it's good to hear that nobody knows about us.
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that. Feel free if you want to drop your a link to your site in the chat or a phone number, just so that people have that information. That would be more than welcome. Anyone else? What brings you tonight? Okay. So as we get into our discussion time together, I'm going to begin us with this question. Understanding that you are all residents of Los Angeles, and this particular meeting was focused on East Los Angeles, but we know that this may have just been a more convenient meeting time than others, and so that may not be where you live necessarily. But this question is, if you could live somewhere else in Los Angeles from where you live currently, where would that be? What other neighborhood, what other part of town? And why? Why would you want to live in that area?
We have one comment, close to the beach.
Okay.
Maybe the why speaks for itself there.
So if you wanted to live closer to the beach, what would be the barriers that you might face? What would prevent you from being able to live close to the beach? Besides maybe cost, and that may be one, or housing prices, would there be other barriers besides that? Okay, far away was the follow-up there. Right, so that could certainly be a barrier to moving to a different part of town, even though if it is an area that you would like to live in, it might be far away from things that are important to you, from family, from friends, from work, from places that you frequent, stores that you know and like, maybe from your doctors or other kind of care providers. So those can all be barriers. Even if it is an attractive place to live, those things might keep you where you are. Who else? If you had an opportunity, you could move somewhere else within the city, where would that be? And why would you want to live there?
Do
Just
you
to-
think that your community has all the amenities that are necessary for yourself, for your family? Is there anything that other communities have that yours does not? That you would like to see? So from Michelle, she said she'd like to be able to buy a house in the community that she lives in, but it's too expensive. Yes, yes. So housing costs is a major issue in the city for renters and for homeowners. The cost of housing in the city is quite high. You know, which is why you have a lot of folks who are paying a large portion of their income towards rent, as you know, was mentioned earlier in the presentation, as far as those being a large percentage of folks are suffer from severe cost burden, where they're paying 50% or more of their income towards rent. Because the cost of housing is so much, and it does not align with the actual earnings and the income that people are getting. So most of people's income goes towards their housing, and the city is very expensive. And we're all dealing with that. And of course, that has impact on where you would like to live or where you would like to be able to purchase, if you could, because I'm sure it's hard to save for a place to purchase when you're spending a large portion of your income towards rent.
And I think a lot of times people talk about high rental prices a lot when we talk about fair housing and access to housing. But the study that we're working on is going to look at access to buying homes as well. So folks being able to get loans, being able to look for homes in neighborhoods that they would like. So we'll look at both sides of the market within it. And I wanted to, Daniel shared in the chat a link to some of the rental protections that were put in place during COVID-19, a link to the city's housing department. So the question there about kind of how that relates to this meeting. This meeting is not specifically about any any of these programs specifically, but I think that these types of things, so looking at how to prevent evictions, looking at ways to help folks avoid rent increases, or what to do if they're facing rent increases, things helping to mediate landlord tenant issues. These are the type of topics that the study that we're doing is concerned with. So these exact strategies might not be things that you see come out of it, but things related to these topics. So it does relate to the meeting, although the meeting is maybe not specifically kind of addressing these things there. And we shared at the beginning a hotline, maybe that's Heaven can put up again. So if folks have questions about the programs in that link, the LAHD Rent Division staff would be able to address those, and you could contact them through that hotline. And Nancy, feel free to add anything if you'd like.
No, that's accurate. As far as the COVID protections for tenants, that is what the information we have available now. If there's any questions or any assistance needed in regards to that, as Melissa said, folks are encouraged to reach out to our hotline staff so they can help you with your specific issue. I do want to say also, I believe, Daniel, you said that you found out, and I see your hand up, you found out about this meeting from our website, which is great. Also on our website, our Assessment of Fair Housing webpage, we have not just updates about what we're doing about this project, but also our previous AFH is there. So it's there for you to be able to access and be able to also give you an idea of what is this that we're doing, what is the end, what's the outcome in terms of this work, and what will this actually look like? Because I know at this time it may seem somewhat abstract, not really grasping what perhaps where we're going. And I think that would be a good place to really look at what we did before in terms of our previous AFH plan. And then, what gives you an idea of what we're planning to do with the update with this work now. So I would encourage you to take a look at that plan, and it also includes our previous goals and strategies that came out of that work. And that is helpful because that is actually the core of what we intend to develop from these various discussions that we're having, and we're going to continue to have in terms of actual goals and strategies with milestones for the next, in terms of what we're planning for the next 5 years, and things that will really be items in which we're going to hold us accountable, and something that we will intend to report on a yearly basis in terms of how we're making progress on those specific goals and strategies that were developed based off of the feedback that we received, and as well as also just in terms of the participation that we're having from the public. So that's something that I would direct you to take a look at, just to really get a sense as to what's the point of the work that we're doing. So Daniel, you can go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, the question was, so also on two things. One is related to the questions that are being asked here are mirroring the survey that was on the site. That it's like, click here, take it 7 to 10 minutes, easy questions to answer, works well, submit. I'm wondering if this get-together is basically trying to get qualitative things versus data quantitative stuff, like that form. Because in my mind, that could be required. If a person can get on Zoom with a computer, they can fill that form out, could be a prerequisite to attending this. And then unpacking what the larger conversation around discrimination, because the definition continues to widen. I suspect people aren't thinking about what I pointed out earlier about the discriminatory, it's great that the data shows 90% of people have Wi-Fi in Los Angeles County or high-speed internet. I don't believe that. There's no way that's true. We all know that. That of housed people, great. It's just not possible. Second point is the link that I shared, while it's not exactly what tonight's meeting is about, because I think someone that introduced that I shared that link and wondered if there were any topics. Yes, they are related. What I think could be useful, I don't know who's in here in this room necessarily, but to have someone with LAHD or other county or city or county organizations look at that and like, okay, this is something that we want more information on, whether it's, but there's no hard data that's going to come out of this. You can record it. There's nothing actionable that's coming out of this, unless you're going to provide us with a bunch of resources afterwards to better understand, the discrimination. Like, I have a service animal, and there's weird language on that link that I sent about, having a dog from COVID-19. It's like, well, did I have to have gotten one? Can I be like, what, you know what I'm saying? Like, everyone's spinning their wheels here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be critical, but like, come on, we need to do better. And this meeting makes no sense. Like, and I'm very interested in supporting the efforts of what, LAHD and the other organizations are trying to do here. Because there's quite a large problem that this county and city are facing. And there's just basic information on a website, whether it's that link or another one, that a person can't make sense of. And then this hotline, I was on hold, which I don't mind because everyone's busy, but then midway through a pleasant conversation, all of 2 minutes long, the call dropped. Couldn't there be an initiative there, whether it's that hotline or any, because this has happened for me and other people I know in the county, where you're just talking to someone, the call just drops. Boom.
Okay.
There's a lot there to unpack, but I'm the type of person to make a lot of noise about something, but not for the sake of complaining, but for the sake of pointing things out and then finding some, solution orientation. And together, qualitative data is nice and all, but all of you are professionals and have jobs and are taking your time to organize this meeting. What are you going to get out of it? No one's even sharing anything that's in here other than those that are hosting it and co-hosting it.
Yeah, so
like
this is
speech. Come on, like, sorry, whoever wrote that. I'm sorry if you feel discriminated against. Like, maybe I want to live in the mountains. It's not relevant. There's room for humor, but like, come on.
So these meetings that we're doing, this represents one of the tools that we are using to collect input and to conduct engagement with the community. This is one of 7 of these meetings, and some participation in the meetings has ranged. I think we've had some with really strong participation, some with less, but I think what's important is what we do want from the meetings is, like you're saying, qualitative input that helps us. This is the very beginning, really, of the AFH process. And so we have not yet dug into new, fresh data. We haven't begun the process yet of identifying what the fair housing barriers that must be prioritized, what those contributing factors are, and then what we would recommend as strategies to address them. So what we hear from community members kind of gives us a sense of what people are experiencing, draws our attention to issues that we may not find in the data alone. and points us in directions that people have brought to our attention so that we know. So I think, this is one of the opportunities. The survey is another that does collect some quantitative data that we can use as well. But, I think one of the important things is the opportunity for people to participate in the process. And this is one of those opportunities. And I think I would say that it's important that we have offered it and provided the venue, the resources here, so that people who knew about it and were interested in the meeting had a place where they could come and join and share their thoughts, their ideas, what was on their mind.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing though, to add to that would be the people who might, I'm underlining, might need this most aren't in this meeting. They're not here. They're either already displaced or they just, for a litany of reasons, disability,
Sure.
can't pay their bills already. So there was someone recently canvassing my neighborhood because there's a very interesting change. It seems to be like what occurred in Silver Lake 15 years ago and onward. It's very, 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 very mixed socioeconomically. And I said to the person who is canvassing for the City Council, District 13, why don't you just put things on telephone poles saying, here's this going on, here's this going on, here's this going on, instead of having to dig through websites that also include links that are old, that aren't taken down. It's like, who knows what's new? Like I said, that link I shared earlier, there's a duplicate page. Only difference is it doesn't say updated December 5th. There's dozens of those. So like this meeting, people who need it most, I can think of 2 neighbors right now who are terrified of getting evicted. They don't know any of their rights. They don't know where to go. You know what I mean? So the people who are answering the phones at these city council offices could easily go out and just start putting things on telephone poles or something, if that's even legal. There's a better way to reach, versus barriers to, things that people who are fortunate in different ways are here. Would be my guess. I don't want to monopolize everything, but I know that there's points there that.
Yeah, I'll just share that over the next couple months, we're also going to be doing a series of focus groups with community organizations and folks they serve. So there is going to be, this was a meeting that was kind of open to anyone in the city, this series of meetings, but we are going to do another series that's really more focused on particularly reaching out to folks who are often impacted by housing discrimination or housing affordability. So kind of like Jeremy said, these meetings are one way we're getting input. I think the survey is another. So for people who aren't able to make it to a meeting and kind of just want to answer, like you said, in 10 minutes, that option is there. But we're also doing kind of more in-depth discussions with some targeted groups too, so that we're making sure, you're right that a lot of times the folks who maybe have the most pertinent input or need the resources the most don't have time to come to a meeting in the evening, don't have time or the resources to kind of find out about it. So we are doing those focus groups. It won't be Mosaic doing them. It will be organizations that already exist in the community and have buy-in with their constituents so that they'll be able to have some of those conversations too. So I think good points and things we understand, and this is kind of one of a spectrum of ways that we're trying to get inputs. And like Jeremy said, our engagement through these meetings has varied a bit too. And some of the information that we got tonight has kind of aligned with what we've heard. So particularly issues around access to housing for large families, that there's not enough of those units. So you might only see 3 or 4 people in this meeting saying it, but when we're able to kind of add it together through all the meetings, or kind of aggregating some trends there. So definitely do hear your points, and there are things that we're having in mind too, and looking at kind of a toolbox of ways to reach out to folks.
Yeah, and also I just want to add in terms of access to information and just being able to get assistance when needed, in regards to issues with phone call drop-in when you call the rent hotline, which is a major issue, and something that we'll be sharing with our rent division, because that is a problem in terms of people being on hold for a long period of time, and then after being on hold for a while, the call gets disconnected, and that can be extremely frustrating, and it just leads to people, having to continue to, go through a runaround. And take some time to get the assistance that they need. So this is all the feedback that we need to know about to be able to improve the services that we offer. And as well as, what information is being provided on our website in terms of tenant protections and things. And if that information is not clear, improvements there need to be made, because that is where we're directing people to for assistance. But in terms of the value from these meetings and what we're getting, there have been various meetings that we've had for different areas throughout the city, and this is one of 7 that we're having at this period in time, but we're going to have other meetings, and we are getting feedback and we are getting information, as Melissa mentioned, that will be helpful, and certain things that we are hearing in terms of just in terms of continuous concerns about certain things, as far as what we're hearing from folks who are seeking rental properties, issues with credit checks that have come up, issues with enforcement of certain policies that the city has, such as source of income protections, and just issues in terms of being able to strengthen certain things that we have in place. These are the things that we're hearing, and and it will all be beneficial in how we're developing our plan. And in the link that I shared to our Assessment of Fair Housing page, at the bottom of that page is where you can access our previous plan. And there's a specific link for the goals and priorities document that came out of that, where it will take you directly to that document. So the goals and the various strategies that were developed are things that came from the discussions that we've had, not just from one meeting, but from several meetings and several interactions that we had from those who are residents, those who are service providers, and those who have actual community-based memberships in which they're working with tenants to be able to really speak to what their needs are. What fair housing issues do they have? What are those particular contributing factors related to why they're having issues being able to access needed housing resources? And we've had a series of community meetings in the past with our previous plan, which involved that, really working with community members, which is what we intend to continue to do. Outside of what Mosaic is leading right now, we are working with a different entity that has partner organizations, community-based partner organizations, that will be reaching out and working with individuals, targeted individuals who represent these various populations that we're speaking about, the protected classes, those who are people with disabilities, those who are seniors, those who are who represent certain races and ethnicities, specific groups, to talk with them and actually have discussions about solutions. So there's other discussions happening and other ways in which we are helping to form the actual outcomes of this work. And this is a beginning portion of the continuous conversations that we're having. And like I said, the plan in which we had is something that came from discussions and from ongoing meetings, which is a key part of the assessment of fair housing. It's not something that's created just by city staff or just by housing authority staff. It's something that we rely on in terms of the public engagement and in terms of the continuous meetings that we're going to be having. And if you're interested, we welcome you to be able to help get the word out in terms of our meetings and in terms of what we have available in terms of our surveys. And that is something that would be helpful as well in terms of folks who are residents. So we welcome that. And again, the feedback that you provided is noted, but just want to reiterate that this is not the only meeting that we're having, and the meetings we have had, some have been a lot more active than others. So that is, the nature of the various meetings that we're having. But again, we're going to continue to have more.
Okay. Well, unless any other questions, comments, or feedback, happy to hear it. Or if not, we'll move on, and I can point everybody to the survey that we talked about and a couple of other ways to stay involved. But before we do that, any last thoughts, comments? Okay. Well, over the next few weeks, we will be updating the city's AFH website. And you see that address here on the slide. It's housing.lacity.org/residents/assessment of fair housing with hyphens between those last words. It's there in front of you on the slide as well, though. We're going to update that site to include summaries from all the different meetings so that you can see what your fellow Angelinos shared. So you can check that out too. And I think that's a good way, maybe to Daniel's point, to see what information came from some other meetings that had more participation and involvement from others. So you'll be able to see that. There is one more meeting that's Thursday this week. It's the last of this first phase of 7 meetings that we're holding. So if you have people that you think would have been interested in this meeting or had things that they would like to have shared in the meeting, colleagues, neighbors, friends, please let them know about Thursday's meeting. They can register for that. We would be happy to have them. That's targeted to West Los Angeles, but it's open to any city residents. And finally, the Fair Housing Survey that we talked about. There are actually 2 surveys. There's one for the general public. There's a second survey that we think would be useful for people who are representing an organization that's engaged in housing or social services. So 2 different types. And as I mentioned earlier, to get updates about the project and future opportunities to participate, you can send an email to lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. If you send us an email to that address, we will add you to our mailing list. Or alternatively, if you'd rather just drop your name and email address into the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. And that way we can keep you updated. This is the beginning of this process. There's lots more to come, and we would love to keep you engaged and involved throughout. Nancy, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Again, thank you. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time tonight to share your ideas. Your feedback is helping to make this study a lot stronger and help shape fair housing access in LA for years to come, particularly in the next 5 years as we develop our AFH plan. So please take note of the project's website link and email address and the chat box so you can stay engaged. We look forward to seeing you again as the work on the project progresses. Yeah, so we thank you for coming, and thank you for spending your time with us, and we hope that you will stay tuned for additional updates about this work.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good night, everyone. We appreciate it.